Hey, hi, how are you? My name is Felt, and welcome back to Final Fantasy XIV. And today we're talking about something a little more specific, centered in on one particular thing, and it's why you might have seen me playing so much Dark Knight lately, and why you might have seen me trying to power level it on my ult, who I typically tank on. Dark Knight is currently just my favorite tank in the game right now. Like, hands down, hands up, hands sideways, hands wherever you want them to be, really. I really like the way the Dark Knight feels right now, and it's because of a few changes that I've gone through lately, combined with the way that the job works at a base level. So let's talk about all of that and why I think Dark Knight's a great tank right now, while I stutter over all of my words in my intro speech, and while I yell at you about the fact that most of the people watching these videos aren't actually subscribed, so you should probably hit the subscribe button. Literally 99% of you aren't subscribed according to my analytics, and this is where I typically pop up a graphic. If I can remember how to do that, I'll probably do it. It'll be like, wow, literally none of you are subscribed. And I'll be like, yeah, get guilted into hitting the sub button. Either way, let's hop right into the video. Alright, so let's just kind of go through a quick list of what I'm going to talk about in this video, and then I'll get into more detail throughout the rest of it. First and foremost, it's a job that is busy during its burst with a lot of buttons to push, but during downtime it's mostly management, and you're allowed to think about mechanics. It's got a case of the mana managers, and by that I mean you have to manage your mana for this job, and balance it between when you need to use it for mitigation and when you want to burn it for raw damage. It's not as complex as it sounds, it's actually quite simple, however I still enjoy that aspect of the job. It has pretty solid personal mit for 8-person content, that makes it a really solid main tank and a very helpful off tank. The changes to Blood Weapon and Living Dead being one of the main reasons it has skyrocketed to the top of my personal favorites, and we'll go into big detail about what those changes were and why I think it was so good for the job. And just finally, just visually, thematically, it's just really cool. It's got a lot of really neat stuff going for it that I really enjoy. So let's just break down into the nitty-gritty, shall we? Alright, so what do I mean by busy during burst, but not too busy of a job? During your burst windows, you won't have to put a lot of buttons on cooldown very quickly. You're going to have to use Blood Weapon, Delirium, a lot of Casks of Edge of Shadow, Carven Spit, some Blood Spillers, Summon Your Living Shadow, 2 Plunges, Salted Earth, the Salt and Darkness proc of Salted Earth, and then 2 Shadowbringers. Those are all during those big 2-minute burst windows, the even minute bursts that everyone has party buffs during. You have to put all of that on cooldown within a certain amount of time, and it's a lot of buttons to be pressing. However, during the rest of the fight, you're just kind of going 1, 2, 3. Oh, my dark side might run out soon. I should hit Edge of Shadow. Oh, I'm going to overcap my plunges. May as well use one for damage. Oh, I don't want to overcap Blood Gauge. Let's use Blood Spiller. Odd Minute Burst gets a little more intense again because you get a lot of free mana from Blood Weapon, and you get 3 casts of Blood Spiller with Delirium. But it's a little more tame. You'll have to be hitting Carven Spit on every odd minute as well. Salted Earth only comes up every 90 seconds though, so it'll be a little desync throughout the fight, which is nice. And you don't need to be hitting your 2 plunges or any Shadowbringers during your odd minute bursts either. So that's what I mean. It's a little crazy during even minute bursts in that you have like 4 extra buttons to be pushing. However, during your odd minute bursts and during your filler phases, you're just kind of building gauges, making sure you don't overcap, and just kind of chilling. It's a very nice pacing, and it feels very similar to Ninja in that way. And that you have these crazy 2-minute burst windows where you throw in everything in the kitchen sink at the boss really fast. And then the odd minute burst windows, you throw like a good chunk of stuff, but it's a lot more calm than your even ones. And then you have just a really nice long filler phase where you just get to kind of do mechanics, focus on the fight, make sure your positionings are good, make sure you're pre-prepping your gauges, and making sure that you have everything ready to go for your big burst windows. And it's a style of play that I enjoy. It's why I mana management. It's really much simpler than I make it out to be. And while it is very simple, it is just enough brain power that it keeps me paying attention to my job. So when you are in endgame fights and you are in fights that either have tank busters for both tanks, or in fights that have both tanks eating autos, or you're main tanking a fight, you essentially always want to have 3000 MP ready to cast the Blackest Night, or TBN. However, you also need to make sure that your dark side buff, which is a buff that you get for casting Edge of Shadow, never falls off, because that is a, I believe, 10% damage buff, which is pretty sizable across the course of a fight. So, you have to really balance the idea of, well, I need to keep 3k mana up to make sure I can use TBN for the next buster that's incoming, but I also need to spend 3k to make sure my dark side buff has enough duration on it to last until the next time I can hit a Edge of Shadow. Thankfully, if TBN does break to anything, it will give you a free cast of your Edge of Shadow, meaning that your gauge will not run out as long as TBN is breaking. It is not a true DPS versus mitigation thing. TBN is DPS neutral as long as it breaks. So, like I said, as you can tell from the explanation, it's a little more simple than I made it sound. However, it is a nice little mini mental game of, well, I know no tank busters are coming, so I'm going to just burn through all of my mana during this burst window to do as much damage as possible, because I know I don't need to use TBN for mitigation at any point in the next 20 seconds or so. Personal mitigations that I kind of brought up earlier, they're really powerful. Now, you might have heard a lot of people talk trash about Oblation. However, I am personally of the opinion that while it is not as good as a lot of the other mitigations that other jobs got, it is still very serviceable and it still serves a very good purpose. My personal usage of it is in parts of fights where there's a lot going on and the tank just won't get as much attention because of mechanics going off, I'll be using Oblation to make auto attacks deal less damage to either myself or the main tank, because Oblation is a targeted ability. It says reduces damage taken by party member or self. You can throw it on anybody. Anytime anyone's taking damage from mechanics, either on purpose or on accident, you can be throwing oblations on them to make them take less damage, which is just generally nice. And the same can be said for TBN. It's 25% HP shield. It's just really good. 25% HP shield is just nothing to be sneezed at. It is a very, very powerful shield that will just be amazing mitigation, and like I said during the mana management portion, it is DPS neutral. As long as TBN breaks, you will get a free cast of Edge of Shadow, making life just easier for yourself. I think that its mitigations are very powerful. I will still give an asterisk to Dark Mind. I think Dark Mind is very good, but you unfortunately need to know what type of damage an ability deals. I know that I had that problem when I was helping people clear P4 Savage right now, and that I would use Dark Mind on one of the tank busters without realizing that the tank buster was in fact physical damage. Because that's just not something that I personally had looked up ahead of time. It was a poor planning decision on my part, as someone has already cleared the fight. However, that is something that you need to keep in mind. If you're in prog situations, don't be afraid to just use it and see if it does mitigate damage, you know? Otherwise, just kind of sit on it and maybe just use Rampart, Shadow Walls, and Oblations instead. It is 20% MIT, so it is a lot of MIT. So if you do know it's magic damage, feel free to use it. However, that is just something to keep in mind about it. Alright, so let's talk about two of the big things that made me like this job a lot more right now. Number one of which being the way Blood Weapon changed. Blood Weapon still has the same effect, that it will increase your blood gauge by 10% per GCD delivered, and restore 600 MP upon landing a weapon skill or spell. However, the way that it changed is in place of it being a flat 10-second timer, meaning that to get 5 procs of Blood Weapon you had to be running a certain GCD and always weave it really late in the weave window, it is now 15 seconds with 5 stacks. Meaning that, unless you very, very, very poorly do something and miss like 2 to 4 seconds of uptime on a boss, you're probably going to be getting all your procs of Blood Weapon. And that was just a really nice change. It makes it so that your GCD can change to align your rotation better with certain party comps. It means that you can actually change your GCD speed to make something more comfy for a fight duration. It means you don't have to always run a certain speed, for one. And second, it means that if you're having a day where you have bad ping, it's much, much, much less likely that you'll miss a proc of Blood Weapon and just absolutely tank the way that you were planning on using abilities throughout a fight. I think it's just a really nice change. Speaking of changes, let's talk about Living Dead, and oh my god, they made this skill one of the best invulns in the game. It's a lot of text, and I know it's a lot of text, and I know it's really confusing if you don't understand the basics of how Living Dead works. So let's go through it in the most layman terms that I can and explain why the change is so good. The way that it works is you pop the skill, and if your character would drop to 0 HP, you will not die. You will instead drop to 1 and change the buff that you've put on yourself from Living Dead to Walking Dead. That's the most important thing. You have this skill active. If your character would die, it goes from Living Dead to Walking Dead, and Walking Dead gets a 10-second timer right then. While Walking Dead is active, your character cannot die. And the way that it used to work, and technically still works, but it's much harder for this negative to come true, is that if your 10-second timer runs out without your character's full HP amount having been restored, you will be knocked out. That is how it used to work and how it still works. However, there is an addendum to how it now works. That used to just be the full effect. If you dropped to 1 HP, you would not die. You would instead become unkillable for 10 seconds until your HP was restored to full. If your HP was not restored to full, you would die. That was how it used to work. That is still how it worked. However, Walking Dead now has an additional effect. When you deliver a weapon skill, or deliver a spell, under the effect, when you're under the effects of Walking Dead, you will now get a 1500 potency cure. 1500 potency. If you want to know how much that is, let's go look at Warrior, the tank that's well known for being a self-healer. Bloodwetting, 400. 400 potency cure per weapon skill delivered. Equilibrium, 1200 for the burst heal. Let's go back to Dark Knight. 1500 per weapon skill delivered. It is literally a better equilibrium every time you hit a GCD when you are in Walking Dead. Meaning that healers now don't need to heal you after you pop Living Dead. They don't. You will full heal within those 10 seconds. You will. You will go back to full. It is massive healing that makes the healers unnecessary. And another part of it that got made even better, which I adore, is that when you full heal yourself, like you've given yourself back your full HP amount, you will then change the Walking Dead buff to an Undead Rebirth buff. And the Undead Rebirth duration is the amount of time Walking Dead had left on it. So in other words, once you change from Living Dead to Walking Dead, for the next 10 seconds, you will have either Walking Dead or Undead Rebirth. And a way that both of these function at their base level is that if you are under Walking Dead or Undead Rebirth, you are not allowed to die. You are not allowed to drop below 1 HP, just straight up. That is how it works. It used to be that if you full healed after you changed to Walking Dead, you were then very much killable. So you could just not get the full duration bonus out of your Walking Dead if someone full healed you. Now, even if you like are taking a multi-hit tank buster like say an Ockmorn, which hits you over and over and over and over and over again for like 5 seconds straight, even if you do drop back down to like 1 HP again after having full healed yourself, you still won't die because Undead Rebirth will last till the end of that 10 seconds that happened when you changed to Walking Dead. I know that was a lot, and I really hope that that made sense. I tried my best to explain that in as basic of a way as I could. But the bottom line is, Living Dead is now one of the best tank and villains in the game, bar none, simply because you get 10 seconds of time before you have to quote-unquote die to activate. And then after it activates, you are guaranteed, essentially, a home gang for the next 10 seconds, during which you will be massively healing yourself, during the first half of which, I suppose. You will be massively healing yourself, while still having the home gang effect active the way that Warrior does. And considering it's still only a 300-second recast, whew, Living Dead is very, very powerful right now. And I honestly think it might be the best tank and villain in the game. I think Home Gang is very powerful and very close. However, Living Dead is so good. One last thing that I really enjoy about this job. It's just cool. Have you seen these animations? Like, look at that. Look at that. Look at these animations. Like, by God. Look at the way, just look at the way this job looks. It's just got so many cool animations. You're wielding a giant greatsword. You summon a simulacrum of yourself every 2 minutes to fight with you. It's just got a lot of coolness going for it. And that is just something that I can really admire in a job. It's one of the reasons I actually really love Dragoon and rate it so highly as one of my favorite jobs in the game, is that visually and mechanically it's good. And Dark Knight, after the Blood Weapon and Living Dead changes, I feel like really now hits that spot for me. of mechanically and visually being satisfying. It's incredible. I think that the latest change to it has just turned it around for me. Blood Weapon and Living Dead having undergone these changes makes the job just one of my favorite right now. Hands down, hands up, hands sideways. And that's that. That's the video. That's me rambling about why I think Dark Knight's in a great spot, why I love the job, and why you should play it, and why, and well, not why, but just a quick rundown essentially of the two biggest changes that the job underwent, and why those are so massive for it. I think the job's in an incredible spot. I really hope that it doesn't undergo too many changes in the near future. And I just really hope that you enjoy it as much as I do. Either way, thanks for hanging and watching. If you liked the video, feel free to leave a like. If you didn't like it, leave a dislike. If you have a problem or a comment or a question or a concern, just leave all that down in the comments below. Subscribe if you want to see more, and I hope to catch you in the next one.